Okay. Okay, so I want y'all to close your eyes for a minute and imagine that you're a 4 to 5 year old child sleeping in your bed in the middle of the night, and then you hear some knocking on the door, and then you're woken up, and they shake you awake, and it's police officers and some child service workers, and they tell you that you need to leave this house right now to pack your stuff and go. So if you're lucky, they'll help you pack up some stuff, but normally this right here is going to be the suitcase that you get. Like I said, if you're lucky, you'll be able to pack your stuff. Most of the time, they'll pack stuff for you, like pants and clothes. And if you're really lucky, you might be able to pack one of these things, stuffed animal. So this happens every day across the country to many people, including my brother and I. And this happens where everybody gets ripped away from everything and everyone that they know, and they start growing up in a new environment, which leads me to my topic, which is going to be about adoption and foster care. So, what exactly is adoption? Well, adoption is the legal process for an individual or couple to assume the parental responsibilities and rights of a child, to create a permanent legal parent child relationship, even if this child is not biologically related to the adoptive family. Or to more simply put it, it's the act of taking another person's child legally into your family and raising them as your own child. So adoption can either be physical or spiritual, i.e., being adopted into the family of God. So why do children get placed into the foster care system in the first place? Well, there's many reasons, including abuse and neglect. This would be physical abuse, which is any physical harm done to the child; sexual abuse, which is any sexual contact or exploitation of the child; emotional abuse, which is any verbal abuse, threats, or other negative behaviors that might impact the child's emotional well-being. There's neglect, which is just failing to provide their basic needs for the child. And then there's parental inability to care, which includes substance abuse, which is drug or alcohol addictions. And then there's also mental health issues, which includes the parents having mental illnesses that create an unsafe and unstable living environment for that child. There's also incarceration, illness and death, abandonment, and then family breakdown. So, what's public and private adoption, and what's the difference between the two? So public adoption typically shouldn't cost you anything. It's normally free because the state will actually pay for you to adopt if you're in state adopting a child. If you have to ever pay anything out of pocket, the state will normally reimburse you, such as like if you have to pay for a lawyer to finalize papers, they'll normally reimburse you. But typically for public adoption, it's geared more towards the older children. So like 2 or older, you won't really find any infants because that's where private adoption comes into play. Private adoption is, of course, expensive because it's private, so you have to hire everything yourself. But typically, private adoption is more for the parents that want to adopt children from infancy or birth, and then it normally costs anywhere from $30,000 to $60,000 or even more, depending on your situation. What happens to the children that don't get adopted? Well, they age out of the system. This is also known as emancipation, and this leads to housing instability, joblessness, academic difficulties, early parenthood, and then substance abuse. So, about 20 to 25,000 young people age out of the U.S. System each year, and about 20 to 50% of them experience homelessness within the first few years of aging out of the system. Close to one-fifth of all prisoners in the U.S. were or are former foster children. One study showed that over 90% of children that move through five or different houses or foster care systems will end up in the juvenile justice system. And another study showed that 70% of all foster children are arrested at least once before they turn 26. So, what are some positives and negatives? I don't have my Bible. Positives and negatives of being adopted. So, the first one is a safe and stable home environment. Do you have a Bible? Okay, sorry about that. Actually, Mr. Hold on. Sorry about that, guys. A safe and stable home environment. The good passage for this is going to be John 10:27 and 28. And this passage says, "My sheep listen to my voice, and I know them, and they follow me. I give them eternal life, and they shall never perish. No one can snatch them out of my hand." So, in this passage, Jesus is addressing the Jews' questions about his deity. Many of the Jews want to believe that he is the Messiah. However, they lack faith in his word. In a safe and stable home environment, especially for children that have been adopted, they need to know that they are safe, they're loved, and it's going to be a stable home environment no matter, regardless of their actions. A second good one would be many great opportunities that you will have being adopted and such. That passage is going to be Galatians 6:10, which says, "Therefore, as we have opportunity, let us do good to all people, especially to those who belong to the family of believers." So in this passage, it's talking about taking advantage of doing good to others, specifically those that are fellow believers in Christ. And while this is good, it is also important that we take care of those who are not believers in Christ. And one of the major ways we could help is through adoption. And then the third major positive is that you have two sets of parents. And that's going to be Isaiah 6:8, which says, "Yet, O Lord, you are our Father. We are the clay and you are the potter. We are all the works of your hand." So this verse is a beautiful representation of our relationship with the Lord. And God is our creator. And if you are a fellow believer in Christ, he is also our Father. However, with all positives, there has to be negatives since we are in an imperfect world. So there's three major negatives that I want to go over. It's going to be low self-esteem and identity issues. This will result from the child not being able to find a place where they fit into that family, or just feeling from the neglect of their biological parents. There's going to be forming emotional attachments is going to be very hard. This is going to be specifically for those that experienced early abuse or neglect. Studies have actually suggested that adoptees may be at a higher risk of developing more emotional problems such as depression, anxiety, learning disabilities, ADHD, and even substance abuse. And then the third one is all adoptions, despite their positive outcomes for many, have to start with a form of loss. And this starts when the parents have to separate or part with their children and vice versa. Even for those who are placed in an adoptive family from birth, it can still cause issues down the road, such as a sense of grief about their adoption. So, what are some common misconceptions about adoption? There's really five that I want to dispel for y'all. The first one is adoption is too expensive. Second is adoption takes years. It takes years to adopt. Third one is international adoption is easier and faster than domestic. Fourth one, all parents or all adopted children have severe emotional behavioral issues. And the fifth one, all birth parents don't love their children. So going back to the first one, adoption is too expensive. As I mentioned earlier with private and public adoption doesn't cost you anything. It should be free. The only reason why you would have to pay would be for lawyers to finalize things, but even that is reimbursed, as I said. But private adoption is going to cost you. So, in a sense, it's both expensive and inexpensive, depending on the situation that you choose, which route you choose to go. The second one, it takes years to adopt. This is both true and false at the same time, because it can take anywhere from a few months to a few years to adopt, depending on the situation. And for most in state adoptions, the delay is often attempting to terminate the parental rights over that child. Third one, international adoption is easier and faster than domestic adoption. This is not completely true. It all depends on the country that you're adopting from, because each country has its own set of rules and regulations that you have to abide by in order to be considered for adoption or being able to adopt. Fourth one, all adopted children have severe emotional behavioral issues. All children go through struggles and difficulties. Adoption children are no different. However, despite these many struggles, not all adopted children will experience severe emotional and behavioral issues. Some of this will depend on the home that they were placed in, and any treatment and service that they receive. And then the last one is all birth parents don't love their children. This is not true because some birth parents gave up their children for adoption because they knew that they would not be able to properly care for their child. And they put you up for adoption because they cared and wanted to make sure that you have a successful life. So this is just some famous people that were adopted. First one at the bottom right is Nelson Mandela. He was raised by a tribe chief after his father died when he was 9 years old, and he grew up to be the president of South Africa from 1994 to 1999. Top right is going to be Babe Ruth. He and his sister went to an orphanage at a very young age. The good news was this is where he met Brother Mathimus, who taught and encouraged him to play baseball. And then eventually, a talent scout actually became their legal parents. This allowed Babe Ruth to be able to play 22 record-breaking years of baseball and become one of the greatest of all times in the baseball. And he also became an adoptive parent. Top left is Steve Jobs, who was surrendered and adopted shortly after his birth. Jobs was a successful entrepreneur who became the co-founder, chairman, and CEO of Apple Incorporated. And then right here, this is going to be John Hancock. He was raised by distant relatives, and he actually became one of the well-known patriots of the American Revolution. Right here, this is going to be Simone Biles. After spending time in and out of foster care, she was eventually adopted by her grandparents, who helped her pursue her dream of going into the Olympics. As an American gymnast, Biles became the most decorated American gymnast with 19 Olympic and World Championship medals. And then the top middle, last but not least, although not famous yet, is a picture of my brother and I on our adoption day. So, Pastor Nathan's thoughts. Well, he had a lot. I was able to talk to him because specifically he has gone through the foster care system, fostering many children. He said that he fostered 20 different children. Some he had for about a year, others he had for about 1 day. It all depended on what the foster care system needed at the time. He said many great things during our conversation. He said, don't do foster care because you want the experience of them being in your house. Because especially in the foster care situation, the normative foster care situation that ends up with them stepping away from your home is almost always an emotional net loss. He also said that many kids that they fostered wouldn't cry for anything because they learned, even those, especially those that experienced early neglect, that crying doesn't do anything for you. Pastor Nathan said that it was very nice to finally hear those children cry, because even though it was an inconvenience at times, it meant that that child had built a relationship and actually trusted in you. That child was willing to expend that energy and cry out because there was a trust formed between them and that parent, that that parent would come if they needed any help. Pastor Nathan also said, as beautiful as adoption is, in order to experience adoption, they first have to experience the loss of a parent, which is personally tough because me and my brother were adopted. He also said right here that adoption and foster care, you are inviting someone into your home that has experienced more pain and suffering in their short period of life than you probably ever will in your entire life. He also said that there's a waiting list for parents that want to adopt infants or babies, but there's also a waiting list for kids 12 and older that are waiting for a forever family to adopt them. So, what's the issue and how can you help? Well, the problem is there is a major lack of resources and that there are too many kids entering and exiting the foster care system each year without finding a permanent family. So, how can you help? There are many ways you can help. You can pray for these children. You could mentor a teenager that's in the current foster care system. You could volunteer to work alongside them. You could donate money. You could become a foster parent. You could personally adopt, or you could just provide basic needs that these children need. And then one last thing Pastor Nathan said that I wanted to leave y'all with before we get to questions was for those that are wanting to adopt or foster, are you interested in adoption because you want a kid, or is it because you want to be a parent to a kid who needs some parents?
Um, yes, y'all got any questions or comments or feedback for AJ? Fascinating, we already heard all your thoughts. Somebody else.
Yes. Well, going off, so foster care, um, you don't have to pay to actually foster. The state will normally pay for you to take care of them. They will only pay for like the things that you need, so like the food and stuff. But if you're just thinking about foster care, you're going to grow a lot of relationships with these children, and it's going to be hard to see you let them go. But as a foster parent, you have the opportunity, as long as you go through the extra measures of actually adopting these children. But the major thing you need to know, honestly, would be all of these kids have had a lot of struggles. So they're going to need somebody that they can count on and trust on to rely with you. Now, the first few years might be rough as they start growing into that relationship with you. But honestly, after that, it should be pretty good. Of course, everybody's going to have some rough patches. But I mean, that's just how the world works, you know?
EJ, I had a couple questions. First of all, great job.
Thank you.
I appreciate you. Especially like wasn't you like you didn't just tell us your story. Like I can tell there's a lot of research and stuff.
Mm.
So great job. Where else? Sorry. Okay. I was surprised at how much. Because I'm with you on the. I don't know if stereotype is the right word, but the assumption that yeah, adoption is really really expensive.
Mm-hmm.
And then you were saying like $30,000 to $60,000, but then there are ways to do it through the state. But then there's all this red tape of legal custody and
Yeah.
all that stuff, right? That $30,000 to $60,000.
Mm-hmm.
Did you see anywhere like I'm assuming that's not like one lump sum, like you get a receipt at the end of it or whatever. But like, is that over the course of a year, years? Like, what's the time period that amount gets paid?
Well, the 30 to 60, I mean, it's going to be paid off in years, but the 30 to 60 was like going to be the overall cost, like for everything to be finished.
Okay.
But for the 30-60, you're not just going to pay it all off at once. They're going to have like increments, for court, they're going to give you a certain bill and you pay that off. And then you go to the next section where you need lawyers and stuff like that, you're going to pay that off. So you're going to pay it off more kind of as you go through the process rather than at the very end, you pay it all off at once.
Right. That leads me to the next question. It seems like that's a really good opportunity for churches, organizations, perhaps,
Mm-hmm.
to try to ameliorate some of those expenses. Like try to help out with here are these funds for families who are adopting. Did you come across any? Like, do you know of organizations that do that, or is this something like just churches do on the regular? Like,
I mean,
what do you find there?
I couldn't really find anything about like specific schools or churches helping out, but like private adoption, like I said, $30,000 to $60,000 for like we did the benevolence project and we only raised $10,000. I mean, that's like nothing compared to the 30-60, and that's just for one child being adopted. So like if you think about that, multiply that by at least 1,000. I mean, there's no real way to help out that many people without taking out like millions of dollars. You know.
Another question, then we'll open it up to everybody else. There was just a lot I was interested in, like maybe it comes up later, like the mentor program. I was also really fascinated that I think you said Babe Ruth eventually became
Mm-hmm.
like adopted kids.
Yes.
I wonder how often that happens. Like Like, I don't know, like, that's something you could necessarily research or if that was a part of the project, but it seems like that would be the case. Like, so two questions. One, does it happen very often? Do you know if that's the case? And then
Um.
two,
Okay. Sorry.
two also, like, what are your thoughts on you, like, having been adopted? What do you think in the future?
Yeah. So the first one, I think it is more common than you would think, because those that were adopted understand what's happened to the system, so they have more of a personal connection, so they would want to adopt more, but they might also want to have their own children. And then, for like you were saying, I think, I kind of hope that I'll be able to, one day when I get older, be able to adopt more of those older children, because I mean, like I said, like 20 to 25,000 of them age out of the system each year. So like, if I could get a few per year, that would like be able to, like, I adopt them maybe for like 3 years, just so they don't experience homelessness, and then they can in turn possibly do the same for the next generation.
Cool. Classmates, y'all got anything? Don't you have something? Yeah. I was curious about
No, it's not cheaper, because so all the fees are going to be based on one child. So like for me and my brother, it was like the same amount for each of us. It didn't matter that we were both in the same family. It was just per child.
that's and like so that's true. Aside from the cost, is like y'all were both treated as individuals as opposed to. I'm really sorry, I can't think of a better term than a package deal, but like two for one, maybe I don't know.
Yeah. So me and Serge were actually adopted through public, so it didn't
Okay.
cost anything. But yeah, like you were saying, each child, even though they're going to be in, like you said, the package deal, like related, that isn't a thing, because
Okay.
you have to pay for each of these children. Even if you use the same lawyer, you're still going to have to pay for them to do two separate cases. So it's like each child has this amount of money you have to pay, and it doesn't get cheaper as you go on with more children.
So I'm interested in your opinion. You think that's a good thing or a bad thing?
Uh honestly, I think it would be better if it was cheaper for like families. So like, say you had three children and they were all siblings. I think it would be better if, like, be cheaper, because then you would possibly think about adopting all three rather than having each of them go into a separate family and possibly never see each other again. Victoria? Hmm. I don't know the exact number, but like you were saying, so like in public and private adoption, the people adopting will say no, you can't see your parents until 18, and then once you turn an adult, you will be able to actually choose whether or not you want to reconnect with your parents. So it will, honestly, until you're 18, it'll depend on the person that adopted you. But once you turn 18, you'll be able to choose for yourself whether or not you want to see your family again. Logan? Honestly, it's kind of hard to find like specific percentages, because it's like throughout the whole country. But I honestly don't know. I mean, I hate to say I don't know, but it's just hard to find. Cam?
Uh, what,
Yeah, yeah. So public is gonna be all state. So like, um so like you're okay. So public is like the parents are just like, you're the children get taken away from the parents. so they'll go into state. Versus private is going to be like a mother that is expectant will actually go to an agency and say, "Hey, I want somebody to adopt my child," but that they're not currently in the public system, so it has to go through the private organization rather than public. Okay, so the money for the private is going to go to the state. So the organization can help out the mother a little bit by lessening the expenses, but the mother still has to pay for it, and so does the family that's adopting. But it's going to the state to pay for all the lawyers and the court fees and all of that.
So real quick, like with the state stuff, there are still fees involved. It's just that
The state pays for the fees, yes. Victoria again. I'm just working my way across, guys. So they do not. That's so. Once the child goes through into the public system, the parent can no longer. I mean, they can, but not really. Be in contact or help them in any way possible. And then for private, once the child is officially adopted, the the adoptive parents decide whether or not they want any help from the birth mother. Is that cleared up? Okay, Sophia.
This might be like but I was thinking about like if I were to like get into this like system and like work in there, would
Mhm.
I be able to maybe
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Um, I don't know, but like, I would, I would think. So, like, what are you thinking about, like, specifically going through there?
I have no
You don't know?
idea. Yeah, I have no
Okay.
idea.
So, like, there are people that are ad litems, which just are people that go into like a big organization and like find specific children that they want to help pair with other parents. Because we had an ad litem, so I think that being an ad litem kind of limits your ability. But like if you were to just go there as like my parents actually worked at the foster care system before adopting us, I think you could be able to find children there that you possibly want to adopt while still working and then adopt them. Sophia? Right, right. Okay, so international adoption, it depends on the country, but it can be private or it can be public. It just depends on. So like if you stay there for like say you go to China for 2 years and then a mother becomes expectant, she could go through private adoption. Or say you just want to adopt just a kid that's already in the system, that's public. And then for why would people want to do private rather than public? Private, you don't find infants or babies. Public adoption is more geared towards like the ones that have already grown up, so they will already have been through those struggles. While private, if you adopt right after they're born, they won't have to experience going into the public system. So that all depends, but normally it's like once they become one or two, because that gives the organization enough time to go to that house to see how that child's being treated. And then in most circumstances, the child has to be pulled away from that parent because they're not providing for them or they're abusing them. Pam?
I guess I guess my question is how what determines whether they're
Yeah, so foster care system is like the broad term. It's like so foster houses or group homes. That's like considered the same. like the same thing, but like for adoption, you can go through either of those and still adopt. Like just because you're in a foster house doesn't mean you can't be going into adoption.
What if, what if you like, biological parents?
Right. So that's what I was talking about the parental rights. So like some parents, that's why adoption can take years because parents are always trying to like some parents are trying to push off saying, "Hey, we can get better, we can get rid of drugs, we can do all of this." So the state has to technically give them a certain period of time to see if they can actually fix that. So as you were asking, so like so let's just say the state gives you the parents 6 months to be able to fix up all of that. If they stop drugs, if they stop abuse, if they fix their mental health, and the state deems it act what's the right word? If the state deems it like where you can actually go back and the mother wants to, then she can technically pull them back. But normally they do that and then they fix up for about a couple of days, maybe a week or so, and then they go back to their routine because normally they're just trying to appease what the state sees when in reality they actually haven't fixed what they were supposed to.
Run here real quick. So the work, like Sophia's all the social work, caseworker and stuff doing, like it's a person with eyes on the situation. So some friends of ours were foster parents, and they were looking to adopt the child that they had fostered for a couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
But the whole agreement was they went into the foster relationship with the yes, we would like to adopt at some point. So the reason the foster care lasted a little bit longer than most
Mm-hmm.
foster homes would is the court had given mom opportunity to go to rehab, to get things, to get a job and all that stuff. And so the caseworker was just really gracious and was apparently just did a fantastic job, like working between. And now, so the mom actually was able to get a job, was able to clean up and all that stuff. The child was able to come back home, but then also now they have still like an ongoing relationship where they go see the kid every Christmas or so, and hang out with mom and try and get dad in church and like all this great stuff, right? So, but that's the whole point is like that's why these things take sometimes years at a time to develop because a lot of times it is trying to give those biological parents opportunity to hey, you can't take care of your I can only imagine the wake up call that would be, right? And we would hope that that's the case. Which leads me to another question that I wasn't going to ask, but if I'm talking about it, is there anything churches? Again, my mind's in where Christian institutions are.
Right.
Is there anything churches, Christian institutions can do when a parent is in that situation? They've had their child taken, probably for good reason. I wonder if there's something that churches can do and like rehab facilities can do in order to help parents get custody back of their kids. I know, again, like this is almost like a whole parallel project in and of itself. But what do you think about that?
I think that churches, to some extent, should be able to help out, like being able to get them cleaned up. Maybe like if the house is run down, possibly like sending out volunteers to fix it up a little bit. But honestly, it's more on the parents. If they honestly want their children that badly, they should be able to quit what they're doing in order to be able to properly provide for that child.
Last call. Anything else for EJ?
Yes, Will.
So when you say that they don't do nothing after they're 18, or when you say they still continue to help, foster care helps them after they turn 18?
So the foster care cannot legally help them once they turn 18 because they are an adult. So the foster care is for children and not for adults. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, except I lived on a foster campus for a few years. Many of the 18-year-olds stayed in a separate house on the campus for many years after. Some of them even came to live with us. But I think, would you say that, because the campus that was built on was a church campus, would you say rules are different when it's church? controlled foster care or is public care?
I think there definitely is a difference because churches have their own things that they can go through. So like you said, it was built on like church campus. So the house for the ones that you said were like 18 already, I think they weren't considered in the foster care system anymore. So they were living in that house that was like kind of in between, you know. Sophia?
I don't know if you did any research on this, but I was wondering, like, if you saw anything about the foster parents or families, like, have you seen anything about the kids being abused within the foster home?
Within the foster? Well, yeah, that's. Sorry.
No, and then, like, do you know if there's a way that we can fix that? Or?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. So, of course, there's going to be abuse everywhere you go, but the system tries to limit that by making sure that there are thorough background checks on everybody that's going to be able to foster or hopefully adopt these children. But yes, there's going to be abuse even in the foster care system, but they very much try to limit that. And as you were saying, how can we help? Honestly, it's a good question, but I don't really know. Like, it's kind of hard because it depends on person to person, you know?
So just sorry to interrupt, but like, this is actually another presentation that we're having in a little bit, and almost not a side issue, it's very related, like I think the question is really well stated, but yeah, we're having a presentation on more specifically, when abuse happens within the foster care system, so, yeah, more on that later. Well, let's say the last two questions, because EJ's been through it, so, go ahead, Will, you got anything?
Back to her question about abuse. When I was there, most of the abuse towards the kids came from each other. They weren't really from the parents.
Yeah.
And most of the time, what they did, they either transferred them to different houses, and there were times when it got so bad they kicked them out of the foster home altogether and found something else for them. Would you say that's actually a solution or just a temporary solution to a problem that's not keeping them?
I honestly think that it's more of a temporary solution, not a permanent solution, because you said that the children are abusing each other.
Yeah.
So like even if they move into like a different house, they could still find ways to abuse them, but it'd be more, they would try to cut the ties as much as they can, but there's still gonna be ways to be able to abuse other children. Like, let's just say there's two children in the same house and the one abuses the other. They get sent to another house, they can't abuse that child, but they'll start abusing a different child in the house that they're now living in. You see what I'm saying?
Last one, Victoria.
I'm just curious of more like what your personal experience with all this is. Like, and you can be as broad as you want, but saying like, I mean, some kids only get like tiny little trash bags to take with them, or like
Mhm.
the emotional state. Like, what were your like personal feelings going through the system, and does that still like affect you now?
That's hard because, I mean, I don't really remember it because I was so young. Because me and Serge got adopted, so I was 5 and he was like 2. So that was kind of way back then. My parents told me that we actually rolled up in a cop car. So, I don't really, in some ways, yes, it still affects me, but I've kind of let that, like, the past is gonna be the past. Whatever happens is gonna affect you, but I try not to let it affect what's gonna be in my future.
I think that's a good spot to end. Good job, EJ.